God isn't asking you to be someone else. He knows exactly who you are and exactly what you bring to the table because He created you, and you are the one who God is calling to the specific task before you. Sometimes we look at others who are living in their God-given purposes and think, well, they're a good speaker, they're a good leader, they're a good teacher, they're a good fill in the blank, and I couldn't do those things, but I love God's clap back here. Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking about how God will equip you as you go. And the Bible story we're going to be looking at is a very relatable one because it speaks to the very insecurities I think so many of us feel of who am I to do this thing that God is calling me to do? Or what if I am ineffective in doing this thing? Or I don't feel qualified for this. And this story shows us God's patient and gentle assurance to these fears, but it also presents us with a little bit of a warning because it shows us that it is possible to forfeit the things that God has called us to because of that fear. And we don't want to do this. We don't want to miss what God is calling us to. We don't want to miss the things that He is inviting us to be a part of. So we're going to be taking a look at how to avoid this. Today's story is found in Exodus chapter 4. So we're going to be continuing on with the series we've been doing through the book of Exodus. If you missed any of the videos I've done so far, I'm going to have them all linked in a playlist up above here and then also down in the description below. And I am so excited to be partnering with Hillsdale College again on today's video. It has been such a blessing to get to work with Hillsdale College this year because their courses have been such a blessing to me and I know to so many of you, and they're completely free. So I love getting to tell you guys about them. I had somebody reach out to me actually the other day telling me that she was interested in learning more about theology and studying theology, and this is exactly where I directed her, was to Hillsdale College, because they have so many courses on different books of the Bible and different theological topics. Like I've mentioned before, they have one on the book of Genesis, one on David, one on ancient Christianity, C.S. Lewis on Christianity, so many different courses. And then of course one on the Exodus story, which I've been highlighting as we've been going through Exodus here on YouTube. You might know that I went to a Christian college and I so value the biblical education I received there. So I love that Hillsdale College is making this same education accessible to anyone who maybe didn't get that or just simply wants to keep learning and growing. Like I mentioned, the Exodus story class is a free online course. There's 8 different lectures and it's taught by Professor Justin Jackson, who is so knowledgeable. I've been learning so much, and it covers the story of the Israelites' Exodus journey, starting with God calling Moses to lead the Israelites out of slavery, which is the portion of the story we're going to be looking at today, going all the way through the end of the book and everything in between. The lectures are filled with imagery and music that really help engage you and help you to remember the things that you've learned. So if you want to take the Exodus story class with me and kind of learn more as we're going through this book of the Bible, you can go right now to hillsdale.edu/Kaci to enroll. Again, it's free, super easy to get started. You can go at your own pace. Again, that is hillsdale.edu/Kaci. I'm going to have that linked down in the description as well. And a huge thank you to Hillsdale College for sponsoring today's video. Now let's go ahead and get into it. God will equip you as you go. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. I make Christian faith and lifestyle content aimed at encouraging you to know God more through His Word and to grow in His likeness. And I would love to have you here. And then give this video a thumbs up if you find this video helpful or encouraging, and if you've just been enjoying this series in Exodus. So again, today we're going to be looking at the call of Moses, when God calls Moses to lead the Israelites, to lead His people out of slavery in Egypt. And the specific text we're going to be looking at, again, is found in Exodus chapter 4. But first we're going to start by rewinding a little bit to get the full context of this sort of exchange, this conversation between Moses and God. So God first calls Moses in Exodus 3, right after He tells Moses that He has seen the affliction of His people, that He sees, He hears, He knows, and that now is the appointed time to act, to free them from slavery, to free them from oppression. And I think this is such an encouraging thing for us to remember right at the start of this conversation as we're talking about this idea of God calling us to things that maybe feel scary or outside of our comfort zone or that we don't feel qualified for. That when God calls us to something, yes, it of course involves us, but it is also so much bigger than us, that it is about God working in this world, working in the lives of His people, and that God sees sees and hears and knows. And when the time is right, God will act, and we get to play a part in that. And so Moses' first response when God calls him is in Exodus 3, and it shows us this, our first point. You don't have to feel confident in yourself, but in who is with you. So here's the exchange, Exodus 3, verses 11 through 12. It says, "But Moses said to God, 'Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?' He said, 'But I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you, that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain.'" I, first of all, think it's so funny here that God really doesn't even answer Moses' question. Moses says, "Who am I that I should go and do this?" And God doesn't say, "Here's who you are, Moses." He says, "I am with you." And I think this is a common fear that so many of us have when God calls us to something. I know I have for sure felt this so many times of, God, who am I to do this thing that you are calling me to do? But once again, if you'll notice, God does not respond to Moses by affirming who Moses is or telling Moses that he can do it and really just bolstering Moses' self-confidence. God responds by saying, "I will be with you." And I think this is such an encouragement that in the thing that God calls you to, you don't actually have to feel confident. You don't have to feel like, yeah, I've got this in the bag. And in fact, I would argue that it's actually a better thing that you don't, because when we're in that humble posture of feeling like, who am I? That allows us to remain dependent on God, to rely on Him, to know that He is the one who empowers us. He is the one who equips us. He is the one who guides our every step. We don't have to have it all figured out or feel like we have it in the bag. We simply need to rely on the one who does. Moses' second response is in the very next verse, and it shows us this, our second point, which is God's past faithfulness fuels our faith moving forward. Exodus 3:13 through 14 says, "Then Moses said to God, 'If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them?' God said to Moses, 'I am who I am.' And he said, 'Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you.'" It's kind of a little thought mind twister there, but God says, here's who I am, here's who you can tell the people sent you. And God also then instructs Moses to tell the people who God is and to remind them of all he has done through generations past. Moses' question is, who shall I say sent me? And I think that oftentimes a lot of us have a similar heart question when it comes to the things God is calling us to, and that is, who gives me the authority to do this? But when God is calling you to something that scares you, my encouragement to you is to remind yourself of who God is and of who he has been in the past, both as you read through scripture and see who he is and how he has worked through the generations, and also as you look back on your own life. When we reflect back on God's faithfulness, it should fuel our faith moving forward, because we know, as Hebrews 13:8 tells us, that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, that who he was then is who he is now. He is unchanging. Moses' next response shows us that God takes what we have and by his power equips us for what we need. Exodus 4:1-3 says, "Then Moses answered, 'But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to you.' The Lord said to him, 'What is that in your hand?' He said, 'A staff.' And he said, 'Throw it on the ground.' So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it." First of all, relatable, because you better believe that if there's a snake anywhere in my vicinity, your girl is running. But essentially Moses is saying, what if they don't believe me, or what if they don't listen to me? And in response to this, God takes something that Moses already had in his hand, his staff, and he uses it to show Moses a powerful sign. God isn't asking you to be someone else. He knows exactly who you are and exactly what you bring to the table, because he created you, and you are the one who God is calling to the specific task before you. God takes what little we have, and by his power, he is the one to make the thing happen. His power equips us as we go. I want us to take a moment here to notice too just how patient God is with Moses, how patient he is when we feel scared to step into the thing that he is calling us to. It makes me think of Psalm 103:14, which says, "For he knows how weak we are. He remembers we are only dust." God is compassionate toward our fears. He is gentle gentle, and he gives us that assurance we need. At the same time, if we don't choose at some point to step forward despite our fears and to trust God above our fears, it is possible to forfeit part or all of the calling that God is giving us. And this leads us to Moses's fourth response, which is the main text I want to highlight today, and it shows us this. God is the one who gives us the abilities we need. Exodus 4:10-12 says, "But Moses said to the Lord, 'O my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue.' Then the Lord said to him, 'Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak.'" Moses is essentially saying here, but I'm not eloquent. Sometimes we look at others who are living in their God-given purposes and think, well, they're a good speaker, they're a good leader, they're a good teacher, they're a good fill in the blank, and I couldn't do those things. But I love God's clap back here. I love his response because he essentially says, who do you think made anyone the way that they are? I have given those abilities, and I'm capable of giving you those abilities to empower you to the thing I've called you to. So God is still, even at this point, so patient with Moses in all his questions, but now here is where the story takes a turn. Exodus 4:13-17, "But Moses said, 'Oh my Lord, please send someone else.' Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, 'Is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. And take in your hand this staff with which you shall do the signs.'" So here Moses makes the turn from "Lord, how will I do this?" to "Lord, please don't make me do this." And what we see is that God doesn't force him. It says God is angry, which again only happens as Moses moves beyond inquiry into objection, into disobedience, into saying, "God, please don't make me do this, send someone else." But even so, God doesn't force Moses to do it. God provides another way to accomplish the task via his brother Aaron, but Moses, in his fear, actually forfeits a portion of what God had called him to do, of what God had entrusted to him. One of the things I feel most called to, of course, behind being a wife and a mama, because those are my primary ministries, is sharing biblical truth and encouragement. Of course, I do that regularly here on YouTube, but it's also something I've done over the years in front of people live, whether at chapels or youth groups or women's events. And all growing up, speaking in front of people is something that terrified me. And to be honest, it still does, but it's something that causes me to rely on God. It's been so amazing to look at what God has done over the years, and it has been all him. And sometimes I wonder, how different would my life look? What would my life look like right now if at any of those points when God invited me to step forward into something, if at any of those points I had said no? If when God was putting it on my heart to start a blog back in 2015 and that terrified me, or if when the women's director at our church reached out and asked me to speak for the very first time back in 2016 and that terrified me, if I had said no, or if when God was stirring in my heart to start a YouTube channel back in 2018 and that terrified me, if at any of those points I had said no, how different would my life look? How much would I have missed out on getting to be a part of what God is doing? And when I stepped into any of those things, I didn't bring some crazy expertise or some crazy confidence, because quite honestly, I had neither of those things, but God was the one to take my scared, small yes and do so much with it. That's not to say that I've always gotten it right, because I most certainly have not, but it is to hopefully encourage you that when God calls you to something, he will be the one to equip you as you go. God will accomplish his purposes, and he invites us to be a part of them, but God will accomplish those purposes. Job 42:4 says that no purpose of God can be thwarted. God will accomplish his purposes whether or not we choose to participate in them. Don't miss out on what God has for you and on what He has invited you to be a part of. I would love to hear from you down in the comments. What is something God is calling you to take one small, scared step toward today? I'm going to be sharing my answer to that in a pinned comment as well. And as a reminder, if you want to join me in taking the Exodus Story course by Hillsdale College, which I highly recommend, you can go right now to hillsdale.edu/Kaci to enroll for free. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.